so technologically challenged here. We'll get there. Anyway, we're going to continue with Mr. Eichholz, and if you don't mind, I know that you wanted to give us an overview of your financial policy, so if you would please, and thank you for indulging us.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to conclude the briefing. On your board docs, there's a file called FIN policies. Obviously, FIN is short for financial. The county has, over the past 30 years, developed these policies, and they were developed with the county mission statement in mind. I believe they have significantly helped us manage the taxpayers' money, and they've also earned us high marks on Wall Street. And when I mean Wall Street, the rating agencies that review your finances. I don't intend to read each policy. However, I do believe it's important to summarize each policy for your benefit so that you're exposed to them. Keep in mind the board can modify any one of these policies. However, as they're written, this is what DFAS follows when they manage the county's funds. So with that, the first one, called financial planning policies, is a policy related to how we plan things. It's pretty common sense. The first thing it says is we adopt a balanced budget. Further down in that paragraph, it will tell you that we adopt a balanced budget by adjusting revenues and expenditures to get it in line each year. That's no secret. We also reserve the right to use some fund balance. We typically don't like to use fund balance to balance the budget because I always use it, the analogy, it's like taking money out of your savings account to go to the grocery store. Eventually, you won't have any more money in the savings account, yet you still have to feed the family. So that's why we try not to use very much fund balance. Jenny's office does a lot of long-range financial planning, as she referred to a CIP. That's an acronym for Capital Improvement Program. It's basically our capital projects. We also mirror that or mix that in with our operating financial plan so that we know we can afford what we're presenting to you or what we're proposing to you. We do an annual report on the financial condition of the county. This is a really good report. It's in our budget book. I can't remember if it's towards the back or not.
It's towards the back in the planning section.
And it's modeled after the Government Finance Officers Association software that we bought, and it's really tailored for all county governments. And you plug in your data, and you also are able to plug in comments. So it's, again, something very good if you have insomnia some night to take, and it will probably put you to sleep. And as Jenny said, we do a 5-year capital improvement program with you each year, and you'll be seeing that coming up in, I believe, January, if not February. Okay, moving on, we also have an investment policy. This was adopted in January of 1995, and it was last amended in March of 2009. I will point out the date of January 1995 also was very close to the date that we just got our money back from investing in derivatives. So we developed this policy so that that wouldn't happen again. And that was done, again, by the then elected treasurer, which there's no more elected treasurer. But as you see under 1A, we have very safe, conservative investments. We have U.S. Treasury bills, we have U.S. Treasury notes or bonds, certificates of deposits, repurchase agreements. As you can see, these are very safe investments, and that is by design. What we do decouple from is our pension investments and our pension investment policy, because typically you have to earn a lot more money to pay for your pension fund. So in those plans, we have investment policies that are driven by the financial advisors and experts of each plan. I believe both of our county pension plan and our sheriff's pension plan has a mix of investments, 60% stocks, and 40% bonds and fixed income type of investments. Are there any questions on the first page?
No questions or comments. Good. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Again, I will take questions as you go along. Please interrupt me if I'm saying something that doesn't sound right to you or doesn't make sense to you. We also have on page 2 our debt policies. This was a requirement by the state, and it was part of the Annotated Code of Maryland, Article 95, Section 22, FD, which requires that each local government unit adopt a resolution, motion, or ordinance for a local debt policy. This basically tells the state how you're authorized to issue debt, what you're going to issue debt for, what authority you're using to do that. And again, this really came about after the entire derivative, not just us, but that happened throughout the country, where governments were a little bit taken advantage of. So this was developed. We also have debt issue guidelines below. You can see that we will not issue debt for current operations. So we're not going to come to you and balance the budget by borrowing the money, because that's, again, a very bad fiscal discipline to do. All debt issued, including leases, will be repaid within a period not to exceed the useful life. So we're not going to come to you and say issue 15-year bonds for something that's going to last 10 years and that you're going to have to replace in 10 years, because again, you're going to get in trouble with your debt financing. As Jenny referred to our debt affordability model, we will maintain our debt service payments at 8% of the general fund revenues. And that is just a self-discipline. That is not law. That's a self-discipline by the county, so that we're not house rich and cash poor, I guess is the best way to define that.
And can you tell me how long you have used that, the 8%?
We developed that with Commissioner Levy, which was back in the 1980s.
So you have a history with that, and that.
I remember how that was. It was on the back of an envelope at lunch one time.
Okay.
I remember how how he developed that model.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Let's see. We will also try to maintain and improve our current bond rating. Now, I will say we have AAA bond ratings with Fitch, and with Standard & Poor's, we have a AA+ with Moody's. So we could still improve with Moody's, and they're usually the tough one to improve on. But just as important, once you get your AAA from one of those agencies, you want to maintain it. So we will keep that in mind, in the forefront of our mind all the time. Let's see, we also have the debt issuance will be managed basically what we're going to try to do is match up the cash flow of these projects that you're approving with the bond issues. So whenever you approve a project, we're not necessarily going to rush out and borrow that much money for that project, because sometimes it takes a while to design the project before we get into construction, before we actually need the bulk of the money for it. So all we're doing is matching up our debt issues with our cash flow that we need for the projects. Are there any questions on page 2?
Questions? Great, thank you.
Okay, and then at the top of page 3, we always analyze the market conditions, and we do have a financial advisor, Davenport & Company, that assists us greatly in this manner to identify any time when is the best time to go out for bonds, when is the best time to refinance old debt. So they do an excellent job, and we will use level principal payment structure for our debt. So what that means is your debt's not going to go up and down each year, which would significantly affect your annual budget adoption each year. Because one year you might have a lot of money to spend on programs. The next year we would come in and say, well, we need that money for debt service. So we try to level that debt service out. It's very much like your mortgage on your house. We do have some debt capacities. And again, this really refers back to the debt affordability model, where we're trying to structure our how much we can afford in debt with our annual operating revenues. Moving down to revenue policies, we try to bring you, as we just discussed with the income tax, a realistic but also conservative revenue estimates, because if we bring you revenue estimates that are unrealistic and not sustainable, you're going to be in trouble in the future years. So we will miss it. We're not 100% correct. I know we're not 100% because it's almost impossible, but we will try to bring you the most realistic revenue estimates each year so that you can structure your budget. You do review all user fees with the budget. And like I said, you have a lot of user fees out there. We only touched on the tip of the iceberg. You have water and sewer user fees. You have landfill fees. You have golf course fees. So you're going to see a lot of fees in your budget process this year. But they all are used, and it's important to have these fees because it does help defray the need for taxes, for either income taxes or property taxes, as we presented to you on the pie chart where we get most of our money. So even though it's small, it's a very important process. Getting into enterprise funds. Enterprise funds are those that operate much like a business. I'm going to use the water and sewer fund as an example. The water and sewer fund, we set a user fee rate. So those customers, and I believe we have about 30,000 customers out of your total 60,000 dwelling units in the county. So about half of your population pays a water and sewer user fee, a utility bill, if you will. If they didn't do that, then we would have to recover that cost through, again, the taxes, income taxes or property taxes. So these funds operate like a business. We set a fee that pay for their expenses and are self-supporting so that there's no pressure on any of their other operations. Does everyone understand the concept of the enterprise funds? Fairly simple. We also will use grant funding to leverage county funds. I consider grant funding a necessary evil because sometimes, as we talked about earlier today with Mr. Covington, occasionally those grant funds won't get renewed. And now you have to make the decision, do I continue on with the service or and pick it up through the general fund and, again, property taxes, income taxes, or do we discontinue the service, which becomes a difficult choice, especially when people have gotten used to having that service. So that's why I call it a necessary evil. It helps you provide services to the public, but if something were to happen to those funds, it causes a problem. Okay, so next we have fund balance policy. Our fund balance policy basically says we will maintain a floor of 8% and a ceiling of 15%. And I'm going to really summarize this for you. If you go below the floor, if you go below the 8% of your operating budget, then you have to build that into your future budgets as an expense and get back to an 8% floor. If you have so much fund balance, exceeding 15%, there are certain recommendations that we have in this policy for you to use that money for, the money that goes beyond 15%. So that is our range, 8 to 15%. And that really is what that policy says. We also have a policy for the water and sewer fund that is somewhat similar, but it's more based on the number of days of operation, a floor of 30 days of operation and a ceiling of 120 days of operation. If we have a shortfall, I'm on page 4 now. And actually, I just described everything that was at the top of page 4. At the middle of page 4, if we have a shortfall, again, the first thing we would do is try to recover any surpluses from any other funds that we are allowed to recover from. There are a lot of funds that we can't take that money from to recover that 8%. If not, then again, we're back to you have to put it into your budget. You have a 5-year period at 20% a year for that shortfall before you get back to your 8%. This again is just a fiscal discipline. You can change this policy, commissioners. I would recommend that you don't because it's a good, solid policy. But again, I don't want to mislead you. It's not by law. It's not by local law. It's not by state law that you have these fund balance policies. Are there any questions regarding that?
Mr. Eccles, I just have one question going back to the bond ratings, where 2 out of the 3 ratings agencies, we have a AAA, and Moody's, we have an excellent one, but not AAA. How many notches below AAA are we with Moody's?
We are one notch below. And usually what happens is, like Moody's will tell you, if they think you might get at AAA, they will put you on like a positive outlook, or they'll give you kind of a hint that you're doing something right or you're moving in the right direction. They also give you a hint if you're going in the wrong direction, and that you better correct your house, or else they'll probably downgrade you.
And our last one was AA.
Oh boy, AA1 or plus. I think Moody's uses a AA1. Fitch uses a AA plus, but we're one notch below.
So we're on the right track
AAA.
with them.
We are sustaining and on the right track, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't want to mislead you. I don't think we're in line for a AAA, but we're maintaining our, and again, that's a very good rating. Not a lot of counties have that. Okay, so with our expenditure policies, we have a lot of them there. Well, our first one is that any operating budget shall be balanced in total with excess being held in contingency in the individual fund. So if we have more money than what we have expenses, we set up a contingency and we balance the budget that way. We also have contingency reserves. This year we have a $1.1 million contingency reserve, as you saw earlier in the day. We use those for emergencies, and obviously we would consider a heavy snowstorm a contingency or an emergency. We do adopt budgets at the fund level, and Jenny has already described to you how we went through the budget process, so I'm not going to repeat that for you. Let's see, number 4 is it's intended to weigh all competing requests. Again, there are so many needs out there, commissioners, and what your job is to try to balance all those needs out with the funding for all. So again, you saw the pie graph, you saw how the money's spent. It's a never-ending process. We do approve the budget in resolution form, and we do that after a public hearing. So you're required to hold a public hearing on your budget before you adopt it. We do maintain budgetary control over all our expenses through encumbrances, and that's one big thing. Number 7 is pretty important. If you don't spend your money by the end of the year, it goes into fund balance. You don't get it back the following year, and that's a little bit how we can build our fund balance. If we didn't do that, then we'd never be able to build our fund balance. Now, I will give you exceptions. The Board of Ed, the library, the college, they all receive 100% of their funds, of their budget funds. We don't ask for that money back. Okay? We let them keep it. And you get to approve how they spend that fund balance, but it could be a matter of trading checks. We could ask for that money back. The health department. The health department's another one that gets all of their funds. So some major agencies get all of their funds. They get to keep it whether they spend it or not. It's just been a historical agreement that they get to keep it and use it to help balance their following year budget instead of asking you for more money than what they normally would.
And they still do.
Again?
Thank you. Just reporting the facts, right?
These were the policies that we developed.
That's right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The Personnel Policy and Procedure Manual was last revised January 7th of 2014. It provides for grade and salary structures. It's just to give you a structure for how you pay people. We have entrance rates. Employees can advance through salary range. They typically have to, not typically, they have to have a good performance evaluation to do that. That is subject to the commissioners approving raises with the annual budget. If you don't approve a raise, if you don't provide funding for a raise, employees are not entitled to this regardless of how well they perform during the year. I almost hate to say that, but that is exactly where you're at this year, is the FY15 budget obviously was so tight that we just could not approve raises for anyone this year. So again, when you reach the end of your grade, so each position has a certain pay range. with a minimum and a maximum. If you're here for so long and you get to the end of your pay range, you're eligible for a longevity, which is like a bonus. It's the best way to describe it. It's a one-time bonus. It doesn't increase your salary into the future. So once you get to the end, you get a bonus. And that's called a longevity increase. Okay. We do have some policies and procedures for the purchasing office, which Fred, I think, did a pretty good job of describing those, so we can kind of skip over that. Capital management policies, I think Jenny did a pretty good job of doing this as well. Let me see if there's anything we want to point out for you here.
Maybe number 4 about what happens as the capital projects lapse or after they are completed, the funds basically become available to do future projects. And
I think she pretty much covered 1 through 3. So I think we can skip those. We do have some budget policies. These have been formed, and they were adopted April 3rd, 1995, and last revised March 11th, 2014. I'm going to let Jenny go over
okay. And actually, we just highlight, these financial policies are what we show in the budget book, and one of the things that they require us to do is explain how a budget amendment is done. And just so you know the difference, a budget amendment would be any time you're either increasing or decreasing both your revenues and expenditures, so you're actually changing the size of a budget, where a budget transfer would be more moving money from one expenditure line to another expenditure line, or like I said earlier today, we did a revenue budget transfer where we took the money from the bonds and moved it to the grant funding. So there's different approval levels depending on the amounts, basically. So minor budget amendments up to $15,000 is designated to the President of the Commissioners. Anything over the $15,000 would require the full board approval. So you should get used to every week under approval items, you will typically see some budget transfers of some sort. Minor grant amendments up to $5,000, where there's no county funding involved, is approved by the Director of Fiscal Services. $5,000 up to $100,000, again, where no county funding is involved, is designated to the county administrator. And then if we get amendments resulting from documented reimbursement, so again, this is something, we actually got the money in hand, we're going to go ahead and increase the budget to go with it. If we have that documented, the President has the approval authority for that. If we have any deferred revenue or reserve fund balance or carryovers of the grants, that's authorized at the Fiscal and Administrative Services level. And like I said, most of the amendments of any size that deal with any type of county funding will require majority approval and will be presented to the board. We do also have, like I said, a more detailed for more of the transfers, and that's out there in the SOPs, and you can go through that to see. But again, it's just different levels. Some levels of the transfers only require department head approval, then up to director, county administrator, president, and again, if you need majority board approval.
Excuse me. Can I ask you if we can just go back a moment to number 4 under the capital management policies? I have a question about that.
Okay.
Is there a mechanism in place to track these projects so if it looks like they're not going to be completed within that 3-year time frame, you can do some longer term planning?
Well, that actually, we're actually going to work on trying to strengthen that, because that does tend to be an issue that these projects, some of them could be a right-of-way issue. It's sometimes there are issues that are beyond the project control, and they do end up being out there for more than 3 years. So that is something that when we work on our monitoring book quarterly, we try to get in touch with the project managers to get statuses updated. And a lot of times you'll see something in the comment section on the monitoring page if something is not moving, a reason as to why it's not moving.
Okay.
So we track it on a monthly basis, Commissioner, report it on a quarterly basis, and then on an annual basis, we look at those projects to see if we might want to swap or discontinue one of those because we have all these needs for new projects that are going to be coming before you.
Okay, so there sounds like there's some flexibility on that end. Is there any flexibility with these projects? So if it looks like it's not going to be completed due to factors out of the control of the person who wants to do that, is there any flexibility to work with them to extend that time, or is it 3 years and it's 3 years?
I would say there's flexibility to extend it because sometimes it's
totally
outside of
out
the
of their
control.
control. They're doing everything they can possibly do to make it happen, but because of circumstances, it's not possible. Okay.
I would say it's usually 99% of the time outside of their control.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, under accounting policies, you've already been exposed a little bit to the position control procedures this morning with the state's attorney and the sheriff, but this certainly applies to all departments. The overall objective is to achieve proper control and approvals over adding or deleting full-time and full-time reduced positions. And when we talk about full-time reduced positions, those are positions that don't work a full 37.5-hour week. They work more than a 25-hour week, and when they do that, they're eligible for pension and health benefits. So that's why we include full-time reduced hours in this particular control procedure. And again, it was to ensure that we don't have two people filling one position, and we have too many people on the payroll that you haven't authorized through the budgetary process. So that's the main point of this policy here. Let's see. We can probably skip down to asset accounting and control procedures. And again, this was a policy that was adopted March 29th of 2011, and it basically outlines our guidelines and our rules of safeguarding the county's assets. We buy a lot of assets, and we need to make sure we keep them, and we keep them safeguarded. So that's what this policy is doing. And then finally, financial reporting policies. At the very bottom of page 7 says that annually we will go for both the CAFR Award and the Distinguished Budget Presentation Awards, which are given out by national acclaimed firms. We will conform to all state and federal laws, obviously. A lot of this is common sense, commissioners, but again, we just wanted to expose you to what our financial policies are. I will say it for the last time. You have the right to change these as a board, but they have been in place, as you can see, for some of them for a very long time. They're good principles. They're good policies, but obviously not set by federal, state, or local law. Are there any questions? And again, if you want to read these more in detail and come back, we can certainly revisit these later with more detailed questions, which you may have.
Yeah, I appreciate your willingness to do that as we get a chance to review some of it. Okay, good. Any questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate the information and your time.
Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to brief you.
Thank you. Great. Okay. At this time, we are going to go into administrative session, and I just have a question for clarification on the proper way to do this. I know we need to have a motion to do that, and then we're going to go into closed session. Do we need to come back and do the motion for closed session, or can we do them both now at the same time?
You can do them both now at the same time.
Okay. So I'm going to ask, is there a motion to move to administrative session? Well, I was going to do them separate. I was going to do that and then do two separate motions.
You can do them in the same motion.
The same motion. All right.
Yes.
So then is there a motion to move into administrative session? And is there a motion to move into a closed session pursuant to the general provisions Article 3-305B-78 on the Annotated Code of Maryland to obtain legal advice on several legal matters and pending litigation?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you.
If I can just clarify for the record.
Yes.
Excuse me, sir. It was Section 3-305B-1, 7, and 8.
It was 305B.
1, 7, and 8. I didn't hear you say the 1.
I didn't. Thank you for clarifying that.
Can I speak to that? I think I took 1 off because we moved something off of the...
Okay.
So I don't know that we're actually covering number one.
I certainly
Okay,
defer
thank
to
you.
to the experts. So.
Okay, sorry.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?